Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about relating hundredths and decimals. Previous lesson we learned about tenths, we learned about what decimals were and how they represent parts of a whole like fractions. And today we're going to get more in depth with that hundredths place value. So real fast, just to recap, like I said last time we talked about tenths. This is what they look like written in fraction form, a 10 in the denominator. And then when we convert them into a decimal, I have no whole numbers here. This isn't a mixed number. So I would have a 0. Oops, let me get my pen here. I would have a 0 in my ones. I'll bring down my decimal point. And then my numerator is what will go in my tenths place because it's 7/10. And these actually get read the exact same way. So this is 7/10 and this is 7/10. But today we're going to do a little bit more investigating with this place value here. So in another lesson, couple lessons back, we learned how we can actually make equivalent fractions, right, with tens and hundreds in the denominator. So today this is going to kind of bring everything all together. I know that 7/10, if I multiplied both of these by 10, I would come up with an equivalent fraction of 70 hundredths, right? So I could say 7/10, or I could say 70 hundredths, and these would be considered equivalent to each other. All right, so here's a word problem we're going to look at. It says in the 2008 Summer Olympic Games, the winning time in the men's 100-meter butterfly race was only 1/100th of a second faster than the second place time. What decimal represents this fraction of a second? And this is actually a true story. If you ever get a chance to YouTube that race, this is a swimming competition, the butterfly, and I believe Michael Phelps won it. But it's very, very cool. And yes, it's only 1/100th of a second that he won it by. So very, very close competition there. We're going to use our cube strategy. There's a lot of information in here, and we don't really need all of it. So just looking through here, I see a lot of numbers. And I'm actually going to get rid of the ones that I don't need. So I'm actually going to skip my C step, and I'm actually going to underline my question. It says, what decimal represents this fraction of a second? So I'm looking for a fraction, and I'm going to convert it into a decimal. That's what the question's asking me. What decimal represents this fraction of a second? Well, let's see if I can find my fraction of a second. So 2008 refers to, the year of the Olympic Games. That's not exactly necessary. The winning time in the men's 100-meter butterfly, well, that's just telling me the distance of the race. So that's also not going to help me with converting the fraction to a decimal. Was 1/100th, oh, there we go, of a second, all right, faster than the second place time. So here's my fraction, and I just want to point out real quick something interesting. We have the word second appearing twice with very different definitions. So this second is referring to the the unit of time, and this second is referring to the order of finishing in the race. So just always be careful, making sure that some words are used for more than one meaning. So make sure you always clarify your meanings. All right, so let's get to work. We have 1/100th here in a fraction, and here I have my hundreds grid. And so it's split into 100 squares, and this fraction is telling me I just need to fill in one. So I'm just going to fill in one of these tiny little squares, and now I have 1 out of 100, hundreds, so 1/100th. And so in the form of a decimal, okay, again, I have no whole numbers, so that's 0 ones. Bring down my decimal. And if you remember from, yesterday, tenths were, like the entire column. If I had the entire column of cube shaded in, that would be a tenth, which I definitely don't have. So that would be a 0. And then hundredths, 1, just that tiny little 1. So here, not all hundredths have an equivalent tenth as a the fractions. Like I can't take 1/100th and I can't reduce it into a fraction with a 10 in the denominator. So not all your hundredths will do that like before. So this is the only way, you know, this is 1/100th as a fraction and then 1/100th as a decimal. There is no equivalent with the tenths. So let's look at this on a number line. So here I have, this should look very similar to yesterday, except everything has now been multiplied by 10, you know, so 1/10, if you multiply everything by 10, you get 10 hundredths. So the way that this changes too is, you know, now I have an extra 0 here at the end for that hundredths place value. So if we were to take that 1/100th from our word problem from before, and if we were to chart it on this number line, okay, it wouldn't go here because this is 10 hundredths, so that's too much. 1/100th would actually be very, very, very close to 0. It's a very, very small amount. If you're thinking about, you know, like $1, it'd be like 1 penny, 1 cent. Cents that we use for, you know, our monetary system, cents are essentially hundredths. When we talk about cents, you know, dollars are wholes, and then cents are broken down into hundredths. So you might notice that when you take numbers out to the hundredths place value, they actually start resembling, you know, like prices or like amounts of money. And so the way we would read all of these, okay, when we add that 0 to the end, we take it to the hundredths place. So we have to read it like hundredths. So we would have 10 hundredths, okay? This is 10 hundredths as a fraction, 10 hundredths as a decimal, 20 hundredths, 30 hundredths, 40 hundredths, 50 hundredths, okay, 0.50, and so forth, 60 hundredths, 70 hundredths, 80 hundredths, and 90 hundredths. And now what do you think is going to happen when I get to my 100/100ths? Oops, I forgot my 0. That's equal to 1 whole. So 1 in my ones place and no tenths or hundredths. So you couldn't just say this as 1 whole. Alrighty, and now we can also do this with mixed numbers. So if I had 1 35 hundredths, how would I write that as a decimal? Okay, well, my 1 whole would mean that this entire first block here would need to be shaded in. Okay, that's good. And then the 35 hundredths, so the 3 here is 30. Well, like I said before, there's 10 of these blocks or 10 of these little squares in each column. So if I shade in a whole column, okay, that would be 10, and then 20, and then 30. So now I've got 30 hundredths shaded in. And so now I go and look, and I have 5 more. So I can't do a whole another column, but I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so now how would we write this as a decimal? Well, I have a whole block shaded in here, so I put a 1 in my ones place and bring down my decimal point. And for tenths, each one of these completely shaded in columns would count as a tenth. So I have 1, 2, 3 columns completely shaded in. And then my hundredths, those are going to be these individual little squares that I colored in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 and 35 hundredths. Here it is in fraction form. Here it is as a model. And here it is as a decimal. So let's go ahead and do some practice problems. First one should be a real easy review. Go ahead and pause the video and convert 9/10 from fraction form to decimal form. Okay, well, we have no whole numbers here, so we're going to put that 0 in front of our decimal point. Remember, it's going to hold the place value, just so we know that, yes, this is a decimal. 9/10, all right, well, my tenths place is directly to the right of the decimal, so just put a 9. And because it's tenths, I don't have to include the 0, because then that would bring it out to hundredths. So just a 0.9 for 9/10 is great. On this one here, I included a place value chart. So go ahead, pause the video. How would you write this fraction here as a decimal. Okay, so to help us out, like I said, I have the chart here. Again, no whole number, so 0. Bring down your decimal point, and now here we have 55 hundredths. So, like, remember when we were shading our model in before, the first number here, this is our tenths. This is how many of those like whole columns we would shade in. So that would go here in the tenths place, and then the second 5 would go in the hundredths place. So we would say this is 55 hundredths, right? Because that's our denominator. And then in decimal form, that second 5, we just need to make sure that we take it out to the hundredths place value. Okay? And then one more, and again, I have the chart here if you need it. How would you convert this fraction into a decimal? Okay, so again, no whole numbers, so 0 in front of our decimal point. And here we have a 2 in the tenths place. So directly to the right of the decimal, we're going to put the 2, and then 3 needs to go in the hundredths place. So 23 hundredths is how you would say this number here. So we can convert fractions into decimals, and then let's go the other way and convert decimals into fractions. So go ahead and pause real quick and convert this number here into a fraction. Okay, so when we're doing the fraction, converting the decimal into the fraction, you need to look at the place value. And the place value is going to tell you what your denominator is going to be. So this number here is 2 tenths. So that lets me know that my denominator is going to be 10. And then the number here is going to be my numerator. So here's 2 tenths in decimal form and 2 tenths as a fraction. Go ahead and try this next number here. Again, say the word, and then that'll help you figure out what your denominator is going to be. Okay, so when you read this, you should have read it as 54 hundredths. So hundredths, okay, means we're going to put 100 down here, and then this just becomes the numerator. Pretty simple, as long as you are reading the number correctly. So 54 hundredths. Make that a little bit more distinct. All right, and let's try one more. Go ahead and read the number and convert it into a fraction. Okay, so you would read this number as 70 hundredths. So hundredths is your denominator, and 70 would be your numerator. Now, I'm just saying, if this was on like a test, they would ask you for the fraction form. This is what they would be looking for because this is 70 hundredths. However, you probably recognize that you can reduce this, and it is equivalent to 7 tenths. It's just that the way that it's written here as a decimal, it is 70 hundredths. And if it didn't have that 0 there, then you could write it as 7 tenths. So real quick, one more activity is just, I wanted you guys to take another chance of converting the grids, the pictures or models into decimals. So go ahead and pause the video real quick and figure out how to write both of this one up here and then these down here as decimals. Okay, real quick, let's take a look. So no whole numbers here, so it's going to be a 0. And then I have one whole column shaded in, so I have 1 tenth. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is 18 hundredths. And my second one down here, I have one whole shaded in, so I'm going to put a 1, my decimal point. I have 2 columns shaded in, so that means I have a 2 in my tenths place. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this was 1 and 25 hundredths. All right, guys, great job today. Your assignment is a Google form I created called Menu Madness. You're going to be asked to help fix a menu for a restaurant. So I hope you have a lot of fun with that, and I will see you guys later.